Hello and welcome to the Rabblecast. My name is Eric Hernandez here along with...
I'm Doug.
And on this episode, we're going to talk about a few things that I'll apologize for up front. I do some deep diving, probably more than I should have. We start off with talking about the passing of Mr. Donald Sutherland, who recently passed away at the age of 88. Had, from when I was reading earlier, about 150 film and TV projects, known for a bunch of different characters and roles. An amazing actor. If you haven't seen anything that he's been in, Kelly's Heroes, Animal House, more recently The Hunger Games, he's in a bunch of different projects. Check him out. Was an amazing performer and leaves a huge body of work for us. We go over some of his career, some of the other things he's been in, and just what he left us. And it's a shame that he passed away recently, but as any performer who gets up there in age, you know, we're grateful for what they left us and what they gave us. From there, we jump over to Blade from the MCU, or Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the fact that, well, even Doug had mentioned it, what was it, 2019 you said?
Yeah, 2019 was when he signed on to be Blade.
2019, they, announced that Mahershala Ali is going to be coming to the MCU as the character of Blade. And here we are 5 years later, due to rights and rewrites and production delays and writer strikes and actor strikes and, quote unquote superhero fatigue. The movie has been in development hell for the longest time now, to the point where a lot of people are wondering if the movie is ever going to get made. Mahershala Ali himself is upset, obviously, with the timing and everything. Obviously, he wants to move on to other projects if he's able to, because I'm sure he wants to get paid. But we also learned recently that the film, or the project itself, has lost its second director. So where that sits now remains to be seen. We jump into it a little bit from there, and we give our thoughts and see what happens. And then from there, I fucking just dove off the deep end as far as like what ifs and other characters. And Jim Varney was mentioned. Bruce Campbell. Could you see other actors in different roles? Does a comedian always have to play a comedian? Can they be a dramatic or serious actor? Can you take a horror actor and put him into a different kind of film? It's a question that we're not going to answer. I'll spoil that ahead of time. But look back at some of the films that you love and try to imagine the lead role or even a side character played by somebody different. I bring up the film Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and who could have played Bob Hoskins' role of Eddie Valiant. It's a question for everybody out there. If you want to take it as homework assignment, sure, feel free. And that's rounds out the episode, essentially. We are brought to you by InsidePulse.com. You can find us over there under the various different sections. You can also find us over at Rabblecast.libsyn.com. Check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Rabblecast. Follow us on Facebook for the Facebook fan page. Send us a tweet on X at Rabblecast. Check out the show over at Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Follow, subscribe, leave a review. It always helps out the show. And as always, if you want, send an email over to rabblecast@gmail.com. If you have any thoughts as far as who can play different roles in different movies that you might love, whether from your childhood or more recently, let us know your thoughts. Anything else, sir?
Nothing for me.
Okay. I went further enough with this conversation in the episode itself, so we'll just leave it where it is. Without further delay, let's get into it. Enjoy the show.
I never know who's going to start, so I always kind of hesitate before I actually say something after the countdown.
It's funny because at this point, I just wait for you.
I kind of figured you were, but I always give it that extra couple of beats just to make sure.
No, that's fine. That way, I mean, I've got the counter here in front of me. I give you the heads up, but at the same time, I'm always curious to see what you're going to come up with now. Sometimes you surprise me. Other times we just roll into a regular opening. I'm like, all right, cool. Let's just roll with it. So it's always exciting to see what can or can't happen.
Yeah, it's usually a shit show. I mean, who the fuck knows? I have no idea what I'm doing. Let's be perfectly honest.
No, you're not getting a paycheck. I'm not getting a paycheck. This is just us getting together and having some fucking fun.
Yeah, we're just hanging loose, chatting, shooting the bull, shooting shit, shooting the breeze.
Yeah.
And all points in between.
Full disclosure before...
Rock out.
Full disclosure before we start this episode, last week we got together to do the show, and last week was probably the hottest it had been in this studio. In fact, we were remarking how hot it was here. I'm not sure about your situation over there. Do you have, air conditioning or, a means of cooling yourself off while we are recording?
I splurged when I moved into this apartment, and I got a place with a washing machine and central air in it.
Oh, motherfucker! Look at you. I have an old place. What's that?
After 1 year, 3 months, 3 weeks, and 4 days of living in a cramped ass, tiny ass, hot ass fucking room, yeah, I was like, I'm treating myself.
Fair enough. We have an old place that still requires, for the cold months, we still have those. Was it iron radiators? So they look like the oversized coils that just hang underneath the window. And then in the hot months, we still have to put window units in, which is not bad. I mean, it's you put them out on the back deck, you take care of them, you clean them up, whatever the case is. And when you need them, they work really well. But the living room has not had one in there for multiple reasons. One, I didn't think it was hot enough yet to put them in. But if you ask other people in the house, they would disagree with me. Two, I have a 3D printer in the living room, so I don't want to ruin the prints when it's running, because the ambient temperature does fuck up the plastic as it's cooling, or the PLA. And, well, secondly, when we're recording, you don't want to have a weird humming noise. But it's funny, you guys in the background, you can probably hear my neighbors. No, actually, is it the neighbors? No, it's probably our AC unit from the other room. You probably hear like a slow hum in the background, but with noise reduction in the end, who knows if you'll ever actually hear it. But no, so last week we found out that the recorder does not like when we approach extreme temperatures, because at one point I'm looking down as we're in the middle of the conversation. We're in the opening portions of the show, and I look down and all of a sudden I see read error or write error. I'm like, oh shit. Mm-hmm. It flashes across once, goes away, comes back, flashes again. I'm like, oh shit. And then I realize that the conversation that we're having is probably being cut up into little bits and pieces that probably won't be usable. So we decided to call it early last week. Don't know if that's ever going to be even attempted to be saved at this point. I have a bunch of other stuff I have to go through still. But today, as we're setting up, I have a little setup now so that hopefully the air is circulating a little bit better around it. I have the windows open to make sure it's a little bit nicer in here. It's not as hot as it was last week, but as I go to put on the recorder and I'm waiting for us to get on the phone, I look down to double check my equipment, and all of a sudden the readout on the memory card, it usually shows me how much time is left on the card, how many hours of potential recording time. It's showing 0 across the board. I'm like, oh shit. I'm like, did I bake my fucking memory card to the point where it's not going to work at this point? For anybody who's curious about memory cards, they are magnetics at play. So magnets lose their ability to attract other objects under extreme temperatures. So if it gets really, really hot, a magnet will not do a damn thing. And I was afraid that if we got hot enough last week that the magnetics of the memory card itself was damaged. So tonight is kind of a grin and bear it, cross your fingers, and pray to whatever God you believe in, and we'll see what happens. Sounds good?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it is what the fuck it is, man. We'll roll with it.
Absolutely. You just, like life, take it as it comes. Hopefully it's not too bad. If you're going to be somewhere in the world when machines take over, just hope you're not near a dildo factory. How's that?
Well, I guess.
Just random little nuggets of, But I will say this: there were a couple things that I did want to talk about last week. We started one, so I figured let's jump back to that at the very least, and we'll start fresh, and we'll go from there as far as the different topics, and we'll see what we can come up with at this point. So last week we were sitting down to talk about, and it was in the news, the recent passing of one Mr. Donald Sutherland.
Yes.
I have here the little article from Wikipedia, so I'm just going to read the beginning of it right here. Donald, I can't even speak already. Jeez, damn caffeine. Donald McNichol Sutherland, Canadian actor with a career spanning 6 decades, received numerous accolades, including a Primetime Emmy Award and 2 Golden Globe Awards, as well as a BAFTA Award nomination. Considered one of the best actors never nominated for an Academy Award, he was given an Academy Honorary Award in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Most recently, people might remember him from The Hunger Games as President Snow. He was also in a movie that I was mentioning in our original conversation, Breakout, with Dustin Hoffman, Cuba Gooding Jr., which was a crazy movie when I was watching it growing up, especially after living in a pandemic. It's kind of a crazy movie to go back and watch just to see how something can spread so easily and the lengths that some groups might go to try to contain something. Granted, it's all story, but, they used, I want to say it was AIDS was essentially an analogy that they were using for Breakout. I mean, they didn't call it that. They didn't call it whatever specific disease, the way it started. If you watch Breakout, simple enough, a monkey gets some kind of disease. It crosses over to humans. A human gets it. A human goes to a movie theater, is coughing and sneezing, not feeling well, spreads it to everybody in the theater. He's like vomiting and throwing up because he gets violently ill. And a few days after you contract whatever disease, you end up dying, and the military steps in because they're like, oh, we've heard about this. We tried this before. The only way we contained it in the past was we nuked the village that originally contained anybody who was sick. And
wait, are you talking about Outbreak?
Which one did I say? Breakout? Yes. I'm sorry. Outbreak was, yes.
Okay, because I'm thinking, I was like, what the hell is Breakout? I'm sorry.
Correct.
Okay,
you are right.
Good, man. Good.
Yes, it's Outbreak, the Dustin Hoffman, Cuba Gooding Jr. movie. I'm sorry. I flipped those words around. But yes, Outbreak was the film that I was referring to. Did you watch that one? I can't remember if we covered that last time.
I watched parts of it over the years. I don't think I've ever seen the whole thing start to finish, but it's one of those ones where I've seen every scene probably at least twice between in the early to mid 2000s when it was running on cable. But yeah, I never sat down and watched the entire thing start to finish. I never was big on like movies dealing with like, oh, there's a pandemic or anything like that. Those never really grabbed me when I was younger, and I sure as shit don't want to watch one now that I've lived through one. So
fair enough. This was another example. I can't remember what year Outbreak came out, but my brothers were watching films, whatever they rented from the video store, or maybe it was on one of the movie channels. But it was one of those films that I caught in passing. But when I saw certain actors that I was familiar with, I was like, oh, now I'm slightly intrigued. But as I got older, it was one of the ones that I revisited just to check it out. And I remember specifically Donald Sutherland sticking out my mind as far as being the quote-unquote, the bad military guy who was about to go to extremes just to make sure that whatever military oops happened was covered up so they couldn't be caught or brought up on charges. So it was an interesting story to say the least. And I think the other one that comes to mind, I don't think Sutherland is in this one, but Contagion is another one that, who was the director? Oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name. The guy who directed the Ocean's 11 movies.
Soderbergh?
Yes, Soderbergh did Contagion. It had Gwyneth Paltrow, Matt Damon, Lawrence Fishburne, and a number of other actors. And that one more closely resembled what we went through years later after that film was released, as far as what we went through with the pandemic. So yeah, and I understand anybody who's already gone through that kind of thing. Why would you want to revisit something, especially when it's depicted to such extremes on the movie screen? You lived it. Why go through it again? So I don't know. That's another story for another time. But as far as Mr. Sutherland is concerned, some of the other popular projects he's been in, both in film and television. Let's see, here is a list of different ones. Dirty Dozen, the 1967 film. MASH, the TV show from 1970. Kelly's Heroes.
Oh, yeah.
What's that?
I was going to say he was Hawkeye Pierce, motherfucker.
That's right. Kelly's Heroes from 1970. I believe he was a tank driver in that one. Let's see what else. Clute, 1971. Don't Look Now, 1973. 1900 from 1976. I'm not familiar with that one. Animal House. I think you had mentioned that one when we initially were talking about this. Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Professor. Yeah.
Yes, the pot-smoking professor, correct. He had some great roles, man. Like, he stood out. Like, it's a shame because I was watching, after last week's debacle, I was watching a 60 Minutes Rewind, and where they do like a background on Donald Sutherland. And something I found out, he survived polio as a toddler.
Huh. Okay. And
it was one of those things where he grew up, he was tall, he had big ears that like stuck out. He wasn't entirely sure, like, you know, how to like feel about himself as far as his looks. When he would ask his mother, like, am I a good looking person? His mother really couldn't like put it to words, but said, you know, oh, you have certain qualities about yourself. Like, just try to not be mean about how she was going to phrase it, and it stuck with him so much so that he like hid in his room for like a day.
Oh,
yeah. So, but it didn't stop him from getting roles, and he tried out for plays and everything else, and he found a career in movies. I think they said like over 150 projects he'd been in, and he stuck out. Like some of the other ones in here mentioned Animal House, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, Ordinary People, A Dry White Season, JFK, 6 Degrees of Separation, Without Limits, Pride and Prejudice. I mentioned The Hunger Games before, and a number of other projects that he's been in over the years. And it's just, if you've definitely seen his face if you're a film goer, especially if you watch TV, and you would recognize some of these characters because they would just stand out. President Snow from The Hunger Games, that movie alone, like, just a lot of people just reacted to his character. So much so that when he was seen in public, people actually thought like he was an evil son of a bitch, and he just like reveled in it. He goes, oh, you know, that works. In the 60 Minutes Rewind, he's watching a clip of an old movie that he was in. I think it was like a TV movie, and the character goes through some tragedy, and as he's rewatching the clip, he starts tearing up as he's watching it because he's all the memories of playing that character are coming back, and the pain he felt and the anguish he felt. He goes, oh, this is not going to be easy for me. And you realize just how deep he got into some of these characters that they still stick with him if he goes back to watch it. So much so that he did not watch a lot of the projects he was in. Once he was done with the performance, he would just leave it up to whoever was editing, directing, whatever the case was. And if it ended up great. If not, then he went on to the next project. Very committed, and it's a shame. At 88, he passes away. I don't know. It doesn't list here specifically what other projects he may have been working on, but yeah. Oh,
did you mention Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
No, shit. You were completely. Wow, I completely forgot about that one. Yes, he was. But was he Buffy's trainer or?
Yeah, he was kind of like her watcher before. That was kind of like encoded in. He was like training her and kind of guiding her and explaining to her how things work. He was Giles before Giles was Giles.
Yes. So any fans of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the original movie with Luke Perry and Paul Rubens and Rutger Hauer.
And Christy Swanson.
Thank you. I was like, who played Buffy?
I was going to say, you're naming like everybody else in the movie. I was like, Buffy, motherfucker?
Because my brain immediately went to Sarah Michelle Gellar. I'm like, no, that was the TV show, not the movie. Who was the girl from? And then I remember the ice skating movie, but I couldn't recall her name. So there you go. Christy Swanson, who's still fantastic.
Touché, man.
So my brain misfires,
Touché,
especially when
Mikey.
caffeine starts kicking in hardcore. So a lot of stuff going on. That, and we're close to vacation time, so I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but a huge career, huge body of work. Anybody wants to go back and check out some of those films, Kelly's Heroes, Animal House, Buffy, fantastic films, TV projects, all of them. So go check it out. MASH was such a iconic TV show, especially for its time. It's crazy what was they accomplished with all that stuff. So it's always good, I guess, to go back and check out some of your favorites if you have them. And Donald Sutherland does pop in a few of my, I guess I would refer to them as comfort foods when it comes to like some movies and TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
Like recently, Netflix has Axel F that's going to be coming out real soon. I think it's like next Wednesday, so July 3rd. It's the TV series or Netflix series based in the world of Beverly Hills Cops, the film franchise. So because of that, I went back and listened to some old podcasts regarding it, and then I went to watch parts 1 and 2 in the background as I was editing recently, and I was like, oh wow, like these movies are still fucking great. Like you watch them, you enjoy them, you see what was being done, some of the references. So in that same vein, Mr. Sutherland holds a special place in my heart and in my head when it comes to films. So rest in peace, Mr. Sutherland. Thank you for all your work, and we'll continue to enjoy what you've given us. Switching gears slightly, we're going to move over to another story regarding film, and more specifically, Marvel's attempt, or at least, mistrials of trying to get another Blade movie off the ground, which seems to be having no end of trouble, that they've lost another director recently. It was revealed that it was June 12th. This comes off of, I want to say it was Variety. Jan Demange, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, just recently exited the film. And at this point, people are wondering if they're ever going to get another Blade movie at all, at least with the current setup that they currently have. Mahershala Ali is set to star as Blade, but apparently he's been very, very unhappy with the way production's been going forward so far. So who knows at this point? They've been delaying it. They've been pushing things back. They've been trying to do rewrites. There's been a few rumors as far as the different scripts. I think we've talked about them in the past. But at this point, who knows where Blade's going to be slotted? The only hint of Blade so far was at the end of the Eternals, where the Black Knight character was going to grab the ebony blade, and then in the background you hear a voice warning the character about the sword, and that was supposedly Mahershala Ali, but we don't see him on screen. That was the only hint so far we have of Blade in the MCU. And the question is, how integral is Blade for the MCU moving forward? Because now there's rumors, and this is one that I'm excited about, so I'll ride this rumor all the way until the film comes out. Supposedly, with the introduction of Blade, we might actually get the supernatural wing of Marvel in the films. So, I think I might have mentioned this in the past. There was a group in Marvel Comics called the Midnight Suns. It involves Ghost Rider, the Danny Ketch version, Blaze, Johnny Blaze, who was the original Ghost Rider, Morbius, the Night Stalkers, which was Hannibal Drake, Blade himself, and I can't remember the third member off the top of my head. I'm blanking. The Darkhold Redeemers, and Doctor Strange, and I can't remember who else. But these characters were essentially the good guys when it comes to supernatural stuff. So you have all these horror villains, all these scarier villains, Lilith, the mother of demons, the Darkhold book was kind of like the Necronomicon of the MCU, or the Marvel Comics at the very least. And that book has been brought up recently in the Multiverse of Madness, the Shield, the TV show. So there's potential for launching stuff off of the back of Blade. But if they can't get a Blade movie going, and Sony already botched a Morbius movie, like,
oh yeah,
let's not get into that one. That's a whole other discussion. Nobody needs to go back to Morbin time. And I don't know. This one for me, I loved the Ghost Rider books growing up. And for me, it hurts that we have not been able to get a true Ghost Rider on film or on or in the MCU. Yes, there were the 2 Nick Cage movies. The second one's better than the first one, but that's not saying a whole lot. I love Nick Cage, don't get me wrong. Fuck you.
I'm sorry. I fucking love all of those batshit fucking insane ass movies. They're so much fun.
Look,
oh man,
Neville Dean and Taylor, the guys who are behind the Crank movies, did the second one, which was action-wise was a lot closer to what I would have hoped that Ghost Rider would be, but it was still kind of out there. Their depiction of Blackout was not what I was hoping for, but again, it came close, I guess, but just not quite right. The first one was silly as all fuck, so much so that I never thought I would watch Ghost Rider fight a helicopter on screen, and that would be like one of the big battle scenes, but hey, whatever. And then you've probably never watched the Shield TV show, but they did the more recent version of Ghost Rider, Robbie Reyes, who drove a muscle car, which was, it was a more, it was a modern take on Ghost Rider, essentially, as they were trying to update some of the characters in the comics, but again, not the Ghost Rider that I knew. I know I sound like an old man when I say that. It's not my Ghost Rider, but getting back to Blade and everything else, the idea of trying to launch the horror or supernatural wing of the MCU is something I've been dying for. And even in the comics, it's not something that they could sustain long term. Ghost Rider had a long-running book. Morbius had a short series here and there. Doctor Strange came and went. The Night Stalkers came and went. Darkhold Redeemers came and went. They always tried something, especially around the fall. Whenever Halloween would roll around, they did specials. They'd team up Ghost Rider with Wolverine or Punisher or any other number of characters, even the X-Men. And you had different adventures, but it was not something that was sustainable long-term. That said, Blade at this point, like I said, Mahershala Ali has been having trouble because he's wondering what the hell's going on. On his agenda, at the very least, he wants this film done because he's trying to also fit in other films into his, movie career. It's not easy when you're going to say, I'm going to block out a year for Blade, and then it becomes 2 years, 3 years, who knows how long at this point. I'm sure he wants to do other projects and films. Writers and directors, there's been a bunch of different writers, a bunch of different passes at the script. Same thing. Nobody knows what's going on just yet. We'll see what happens as far as that's concerned. The different directors has always been troublesome because at this point, when you sign on to a Marvel project, you're not signing on to tell your story of Blade. You're signing on to tell Marvel's version of Blade that's going to fit into this larger tapestry. So are you okay with taking direction and notes from Kevin Feige and company? And you're not going to get your version of the character. Essentially, when we go back to Edgar Wright for Ant-Man, he wanted to do his version. He even did like a whole bunch of pre-production work on it, that he had this idea for Ant-Man that he wanted to tell. But when Marvel finally got around to doing the movie, they said, no, we want to do it this way. We want it to fit in a certain way with the rest of the characters. So much so that Edgar Wright says, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to go do my own thing. I'll stay on as a producer, though, but I'm not down with what your vision is. So creative differences is always used as an excuse as to why some of these projects just sometimes don't get off the ground sooner than later, or if they change the creative forces behind them. There is one person besides Mahershala Ali that's still attached to the Blade film. Do you know who this might be?
Not a clue.
Mia Goth.
Really?
Yes. She was recently interviewed, and this is Mia Goth from, what was it, X Pearl. What was the third film?
The third film is opening actually in about a week or so. It's called Maxine, and Maxine is spelled with three X's.
Okay. I've yet to see either of the first two, but I've been very, very curious because they have been popping up. I think it was like on Max or some of the other streaming platforms. And after you've been talking about the movies and her performances, I'm actually really curious to check those out.
I'll tell you, this. You can. I liked X. It was a good time, but you can skip X. Really watch Pearl. That's the one that really. She carries that movie fantastically.
Which one is the prequel? Was it Pearl?
Yeah, Pearl is the prequel. It's set. It's set. It's right around the period where World War One is starting to wind down, but it's not quite done yet, and Spanish flu is breaking out worldwide.
More pandemic storylines.
Almost exactly 100 years before the one we had. So yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But okay, yeah, I remember you had talked about it, and was it X, the other one, where they're all like on farmland and they're gonna like do some like a film adult. Essentially, they're gonna film a porn. Yeah, but like weird shit starts happening.
Yeah, they find out some shit's going down. So
okay, so add more to my lists, and who knows? I have some vacation time coming up, and I might stay up late and watch some of these movies. I have to catch up on a bunch of stuff as well as editing. But yeah, when they interviewed her, she says, and I don't know how true this is at this point because I do know that there are different versions of the script floating around out there, that the vision that Marvel has for Blade is really appealing to her, really interesting to her. So she's really, really hoping that it comes to fruition. So I don't know if that's just, PR talk, if she's just trying to hold on to her role or her position in the film. But when she was mentioned as being part of it, I could easily see her being like Lilith, mother of demons, and just being a villain in the main story itself. But again, how they're going to go forward with this, I don't know what's going to happen. We don't know the specific villain. We don't know if there's going to be another Deacon Frost, if there's going to be another like head of the vampire family kind of thing, like in Blade 2, or whatever nonsense Blade 3 tried pulling off. We have to wait and see. So it's going to be a number of things going on with this film at this point. You had the different delays in writing, and then you had the writer's strike, which didn't help anything. Then you had obviously the actor's strike compounded with that. And then now, with things being juggled around, and after the release of Quantumania for Ant-Man and the Wasp, you have everybody talking about superhero fatigue and are the Marvel movies on a downswing, everything else. I don't think that's the case. I just think that at this point, this movie has been stuck in production hell, and hurdle after hurdle has been tossed at it, and it just happens to be one of those projects that just got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, and where they're going to finally pull the trigger on it remains to be seen. Deadpool and Wolverine at this point is tracking to be a big hit, a big opener. So if you're going to quote superhero fatigue, no, I think people are still interested and want to see superhero films. Probably not as frequent as Marvel was doing it recently, up until the recent Quantumania and some other projects. The Marvels is another one that suffered due to a lot of this. But I think people are still excited to see them, so long as you make it good and you make sure that the time is given to production. So the CG is not wonky, the storyline's not cut up and nonsense. You gotta wait and see. The other one that came to mind recently outside of Marvel was Sony's Madam Web, which I tried watching on Netflix.
Oh yeah,
It's fucking painful, dude.
I heard it's pretty awful. Yeah, I'm never gonna watch it, but I heard it's not good.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you really want to watch a bad movie, watch it, or like if you're into those kind of movies, it's like kind of a hate watch. But at the same time, it's just like no, you can see just the cuts that were made to it, the ADR, if you know what you're looking for, just the rewrites that happened on the fly, and it just does not make any fucking sense. And it's supposed to be the Madam Web storyline is supposed to be essentially like a prequel to the Spider-Man story in the movies, but it does not work on any level whatsoever. So you're just like, why? Why did they do this? But then you realize, the reason why the Spider-Man movies worked as far as live action is because, especially the more recent ones, were done in partnership with Disney. So there was a lot more cooks in the kitchen, essentially, but they were actually trying to get it right this time around. The Spider-Verse movies, the animated movies, they're completely separate, and those writers were allowed to work off of the different things and not have to worry about being stuck to the continuity from the films before. Yes, they played with them and they gave you little Easter eggs here and there, but they were free to do whatever they wanted. Aside from that, it's just like Sony has had trouble time and time again with the Spider-Man movies after like the first two Tobey Maguire movies. They just, for whatever reason, they keep getting in their own way. So we'll have to wait and see. But again, going back to Blade, I don't know if it's a cursed film at this point, because it just, for whatever reason, people just can't get it off the fucking ground. So who knows? Maybe this might be one that they just delay. They might have to recast Blade if Mahershala Ali is not going to wait around for them. There was one of the scripts that they said that Blade wasn't even like the main character. He was like a tertiary character, essentially, just playing second fiddle to other female characters, which that brings up the whole idea of wokeness and, what they're trying to accomplish, if there's an agenda they're trying to push in the films, which Marvel and Disney has been accused of recently a few times, saying that, if you watch, what was it, the one South Park episode where they do the joke and the parody of Kathleen Kennedy from Disney and Star Wars, like, if you're gonna make a movie, put a female character in it and make her gay. That seemed to be like the main thrust a lot of these characters were essentially being written for. But I don't know. That's a hard one to really say. It's an easy joke to make. So we'll see if anything changes going forward. But I don't see how you can write a Blade movie and not make Blade the character. That seems.
Yeah, it's at this point. It's so I looked it up. They announced. How do you pronounce the gentleman's name who's supposed to be playing Blade?
Mahershala Ali.
Mahershala Ali is supposed to be. He was cast. That was in 2019. They announced him. That was 5 years ago.
Yes.
What I don't understand is how did, if you think about it, you're talking about Disney. You're talking about Marvel Studios. You're talking about the company that was, they were a well-oiled machine from about 2012 until we got Endgame in 2019, and then all of a sudden they just fell the fuck apart. I mean, other than really stop and think about that. Since it's been a little over 5 years since we got Endgame, and how many new shows or movies have they put out since then? Have you really enjoyed?
Yeah.
I mean, I can say, whatchamacallit, what was the Scarlet Witch? WandaVision. WandaVision was good. Loki was okay. When Falcon and Winter Soldier was good. Thor: Love and Thunder sucked. Multiverse of Madness was okay. Wakanda Forever may have been one of the most depressing fucking things I've ever watched.
Yeah.
Not because of the movie. I mean, it wasn't a bad movie on its own. It's that unfortunately Black Panther will always the ghost of, oh bloody hell, I'm blanking on Chadwick Boseman is unfortunately always going to, his specter is always going to stand over that. So I'm hoping at this point they just say we're just going to let this go, and we'll have Shuri as the new Black Panther show up in some other stuff and do some cool shit.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, I mean, Marvels I never bothered with. Hawkeye was meh. I mean, probably the best thing they did was Spider-Man: No Way Home in my eyes, and that was like a joint venture with Sony. I mean, there's so much stuff they put out where I tried watching it, and after a while, I was just like, I just don't give a shit, or it's just this sucks, And it's wild because I mean, I can go back and I could put on so many of the movies that came out between 2008 and otherwise, and be like, oh, this is awesome. But yeah, anymore, I'm just like, man, fuck this.
And one of the difficult parts about Marvel is if you miss out on a TV show or if you miss out on a movie, you might miss out on a large part of the storyline, which was something that they always try to avoid in the comic books, where if you missed out on something, if there was a crossover, let's say if it was Avengers and X-Men and the Hulk or whatever the case was, if you missed out or you didn't read, let's say, the Hulk, you could still get the storyline and have it make sense. But now a lot of the different things, like if you missed out on this one character's turn, like in WandaVision or Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which, don't get me wrong, the early TV shows, so WandaVision, Loki, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, those were all good for what they were doing initially. They all suffered from the problem as they were trying to treat them the way they were treating their films, and that was they were doing like last minute rewrites and they were doing different episodes on the fly as far as filming. So things changed quite a bit. So WandaVision apparently had some changes made to it as they were going through. There was rumor of Mephisto at one point showing up in that series, but they rewrote things and changed things around a little bit. So much so that the ending just came out differently overall. Falcon and Winter Soldier had more storyline that had to be changed. Again, due to the pandemic, they had more... The storyline too eerily resembled the pandemic that was going on at the time. Mm-hmm. And they didn't want to remind people who were stuck at home that, oh yeah, there was a pandemic raging out there. So they thoughtfully and respectfully changed that storyline a little bit to omit those parts. Loki, they tried their best and it worked out. I think it's probably like one of the more popular ones out of the series as far as Disney Plus is concerned. But even that kind of like twisted and changed a little bit as they went into season 2 to try to go into what was supposed to be the Kang Dynasty and that whole Jonathan Majors debacle after he got a guilty verdict in his case and it was let go by Disney. Like all those things changed, unfortunately. And that's what happens when you have all these moving parts that you're trying to make line up. The original 3 phases, the Infinity Saga, it's pure luck. Hard work and luck, I'll say, that all came together the way it did. There were so many things that could have gone wrong, and I'm sure there were things that did. They just didn't, publicize them. But that all worked out well enough that it came off enjoyable for the moviegoers. Were there troubles here and there? Absolutely. Avengers 2 with Age of Ultron, some of the other films, Thor, the Dark World, there were little missteps here and there, but they were negligible enough that you could still enjoy the whole story overall. So much so that you could watch Infinity War and Endgame and get the gist of the storyline. You can go back and watch those other ones or whatever shows and get more, but you got what they were going for. Going forward, they haven't been all hits. So you mentioned Thor: Love and Thunder, which was another one that just had high expectations, but it didn't work out. I'm trying to remember one of the other TV series recently. Echo, one of the which was a spinoff of Hawkeye. Those 2 shows just, again, good for what they were, but things changed on the fly. So now they're changing how they approach their TV series. And they also said they're going to reduce the amount of projects that they're going to be putting out so they can concentrate more on the quality of the product before it's released, which is fantastic. We want better films. We want better things. If you want us to get out of our houses nowadays, especially to pay for the ticket prices that are going now, you better make sure those fucking movies are good. Because nobody's going to go to a shitty movie and waste their, 10, 15, $20 to go out to the theaters. And that's if you're going solo, you're looking 30, $40 if you're going with a date. A lot more if you're going with a family. But there's a reason why I think it was like Inside Out 2 so far is like the biggest tracking movie this year, which is saying a lot. Like, we've had some big films come out, but not many people are leaving their homes. Why? Everybody has a big TV screen. Everybody has a sound system. Why do I have to leave the comfort of my house to go to a movie theater that's going to be very expensive? Give me a reason to leave the house.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, Deadpool Wolverine seems to be tracking that way. All these other Marvel films better be spectacles. We're not looking at summer blockbusters anymore. If you want a Marvel movie to come out, it better be a fucking tentpole. It better set a standard. It better be fucking good. They were the leaders for a while, and now they're kind of floundering. Did they get complacent? Did they get too cocky? You can make the argument either way. But now, whatever they're going to do, you better have the writers on board. You better have the actors on board. You better have whoever doing the effects. I know we talked about now that a lot of the effects houses are unionizing because the amount of hours, the overtime, the last minute deadlines that go into getting some of these effects done, that are like done on the fly because they have such tight deadlines from conception to film release, that these art houses have to try to get everything done. So just like anybody doing hard work, you want to make sure they get paid for it and they're, compensated. So I don't know. I want a Blade movie. Absolutely. We've already had a Blade movie. The original Wesley Snipes movie essentially kicked off all the Marvel movies. You could at least make that argument early on, being that it was the first one before X-Men that hit big and got people going, oh, you can actually pull this stuff off on screen. Let's go for it. But as the films continued and as things went on, you can get into the story of Wesley Snipes and believing he was the Blade character or didn't want to talk to certain directors on set. And that was more specifically for Blade Trinity. That it has its own troubled past. Don't get me wrong. But what I'm trying to say is, we've had a Blade movie. It worked. It inspired a lot of things that came after it. Why this Blade movie is so difficult to get made at this point. I would much rather they delay it than try to just hotshot it into production, into post-production, and then into film or into theaters. Because at that point, you're like, oh, another shitty movie from Marvel.
Yep.
It's becoming a trend, kind of thing. So, yeah, no, take your time, make sure it works, make sure all the people are in place, whoever you have signed to contracts. One of the things I would love to know is who has a pay or play deal. Are you familiar with these?
No, what's that?
A pay or play deal means even if the movie doesn't get made, you still get paid whatever the studio said that they're going to pay you. So let's say, for example, that Mahershala Ali has, I'm just going to throw out a random number. Let's say they're going to pay him $10 million to be Blade. I don't know what his going rate is, but nice round number. $10 million. You're going to you're going to be Blade. 2019, they make the announcement. Let's say, respectively, maybe 2022, the film was supposed to be out by. Give them at least a 3-year window. Then, okay, great. But now here, like you said, we're going on 5 years that it was announced. We still haven't seen anything. Production has been hung up left and right. So even if the movie doesn't get made at this point, he would still get paid the $10 million. Even if they failed to make the movie, under that premise of pay or play. But at this point, you have to ask yourself, if they did make the movie, is $10 million enough for 5 years of sitting around and waiting, then eventually getting it done? Like, it sounds like you're losing out now because you're not able to do the other projects that you wanted to commit to. But you couldn't because now you're committed to this role. And we've heard that Marvel is very notorious for saying, we need you in this location at this time, at this date. Doesn't matter what you're doing. You've signed a contract. Show up. It could be your mother's birthday. It could be your friend's, store opening, grand opening kind of thing. Or it could be the birth of your first child. Like, nope, you signed a contract. There'll be a plane waiting for you. There'll be a limo waiting for you. You have to show up so we can get measurements. You have to show up so we can get some shots or coverage. Like, fuck. It's a velvet prison, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know the terms of their deal. I don't know what's going on. All I know is that at this point, there's a very, very unhappy bunch when it comes to creatives, performers, behind the scenes, and people are just wondering what the hell is going on. Will it come to light? Will we see it eventually? It's anybody's guess right now, because Marvel and Disney have been switching gears when it comes to their projects and their release dates. They've moved things up. They've changed things, to go backwards. So who the fuck knows at this point? Like I said, this is all speculation. This is what makes it an interesting story to me, because, again, being a fan of this story from the comics, I would love to see a lot of the potential stories brought together, adapted, whatever the case was. But the longer we go and the longer we have to wait, the less and less chance it has of becoming a reality at this point. So we'll see. But I don't know. We'll have to patience. Well, it's not the first time we've talked about it. It's definitely not going to be the last. So we'll see what happens. In the same vein, out of curiosity, are there any other characters that you're like looking forward to? I know you're not a big comic book fan, but I know you've hung out with enough people that different stories probably have popped up here and there. I know you've probably heard of the Daredevil Born Again series, so the Punisher will be returning, so John Barenthal will be reprising the role. But are there any other characters that come to mind that you want to see?
I honestly don't know any other characters. Yeah, I got nothing, man. Like, I know there's like tons and tons and tons of Marvel characters that haven't been tapped yet.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't know like a whole ton of them. I will say this: like, Galactus is supposed to be. How big is Galactus's ass supposed to be?
He's cosmic, so he's larger than the planet.
That would be interesting to see how they could pull that one off.
So long as they don't give us the Black Cloud from Rise of the Silver Surfer, I think we'll be good.
Well, at this point, I think they figured out that the 3 Fantastic Four movies have all just been just turds. So, but at this point, fuck, I don't know. Yeah, so we'll see what happens with that. I don't know. That might be interesting. Other than that, I don't know what else to. I don't know what else to tell you, man. Like, when Daredevil Born Again comes out, I'll probably buy Disney Plus for a month or two just so I can watch that. Yeah, other than that, man, nothing really. It's not that I'm not superheroed out, but I've just kind of hit this point where I'm like, nah, I don't fucking know what we're doing anymore with this shit.
No, it's a big ask from any studio to say, hey, we're going to have this multi-year plan. We want to keep you on board. We want to keep your attention. Look, there's so many things coming out nowadays. Like, we are spoiled with streaming platforms, videos on demand, all these things that are coming out that you can watch whenever you want. That to try to get somebody to stay on board for what the Infinity Saga was like 10, 11 years. Now we have
2008 to 2019. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we're 5 years past that. And if your storytelling is going to wane and you're going to lose that spark that really made everything big to begin with, there's been a lot of rumors and talk about some past MCU actors returning in some capacity. Secret Wars was one of the Avengers movies that's going to be coming up down the line. And there's rumors that you might get a returning Chris Evans as Captain America in some shape or form, a returning Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, and some alternate timeline kind of thing. So they might not be playing the exact characters that we remember them as. Hell, they might even come back as villains. But they've all said that they're open to it. And I don't know. Like, if you get stuck playing a character for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever the case is. I can understand as a performer, as an actor, as somebody who's creative, you want to try to get out of that and just do other things. Spread your, legs or wings creatively, so to speak. But look, if they're paying you and they're willing to pay you millions upon millions and then whatever on the back end and then whatever deals that you make, if they're able to give you that and it keeps you funded, sure, why not? Like, not to say that he's doing it for the money, but I'm pretty sure the reason Robert Downey Jr. is coming back at this point is because he's done other things. They probably didn't pan out as big as he was hoping. The one Dr. Dolittle movie, I know didn't do so well. There was another project he was working on that just, was okay. Obviously his fans followed him and watched, but it wasn't until Oppenheimer where like, holy shit, like he stood out amongst all the other, ensemble performers. But how often are you going to get an Oppenheimer? So why not go back to the franchise that made you? And not to say that Iron Man made Robert Downey Jr. He was a name on his own before that, but it was just a happy marriage of the two. Mm-hmm. There's not going to be many other projects that are going to come down the line that are going to have that magic for him. So, yeah, I would say the money is a good reason as to why he's going back, as well as being able to get out and, in front of the fans again. So it's a win-win in his case. So I don't see why not. But on the flip side of it, let's go back to, completely outside of MCU. I grew up watching the Ernest films. Ernest Goes to Camp, Ernest Saves Christmas, or Ernest Scared Stupid, or whatever the case. All those films. Jim Varney. I didn't appreciate what Jim Varney was as an actor until well after the Ernest movies had run their course. And to see...
What do you mean?
Jim Varney was actually like a dramatic actor. Like he could do real acting work.
Okay.
And if I remember correctly, the Ernest character was essentially like he was hired for like, I want to say it was like an insurance company commercial somewhere in the South. And, him going to the camera, as he's talking to camera, because the character was of Vern, he's talking to the audience and the audience is, he goes, "Hey, Vern." And all of a sudden he goes on to like whatever commercial he's trying to talk about, the insurance or whatever product he's selling. That hit in that market. And because of that, they're like, oh, we can spin this off. And they spun him off into Ernest Goes to Camp. And then there was the succession of Ernest movies that came up after that. So he had a career of playing this character of Ernest. But I'm sure in some shape or form, he was like, yeah, this is fun. It pays the bills. But fuck, man, I just want to get another acting role that's not me running around in fucking jeans and a vest and a gray shirt acting stupid all the time. Like if you see his range in those movies, like if you honestly watch them, I think it was Ernest Scared Stupid. No, sorry. Ernest Goes to Jail, where so the premise of the movie is he's Ernest P. Worrell. He's, a maintenance worker at a bank, and he's bumbling, he's idiotic, but somehow he's got like some weird, like, genius touch to him that he can do gadgets or inventions, whatever the case is. There's another guy in jail that is a spitting image of Ernest, and they do a swap. So now good Ernest is in jail, bad Ernest is out, and now he wants to rob the bank, whatever the case is. Good Ernest has to eventually get out and stop bad Ernest. It's a fun, good guy, bad guy. They look exactly the same. But there's a scene in that movie where Jim Varney is doing all the different characters, impersonations, as he's trying to figure out how bad Ernest would, react or behave in jail. And as he's going through and like doing all these caricatures, you're like, oh wow, this guy can actually like do a lot of range when it comes to acting. It's a shame that he's not able to, because he's always Ernest. The only other movie I think I can remember seeing him in was the the movie version of the Beverly Hillbillies.
Oh, he was in that?
Yeah. He was Paul.
Oh, I forgot about that.
And that was the thing. Like when he plays that character, he's not Ernest. So yeah, it's very easy to forget that it's Jim Varney. But apparently he was very much into Shakespeare, dramatic works. Like I said, he got paid well doing the Ernest movies. So he I'm sure he had a decent living at the time. He wasn't wanting for much, but at the same time, it's just like getting stuck in that velvet prison of Ernest. I'm sure at first it was fun, comes up out of an insurance commercial, makes the leap from TV to movies, entertaining kids, whatever the case was. But then diminishing returns sets in place, and after a while, it's just not what it once was. And I'm sure a few times he goes, "Oh, I would love to go out for this film. I would love to work with this director. I would really love to do these kind of dramatic roles, but you can't. Why? Nobody's gonna buy Ernest as a drug dealer or a drug kingpin or the good guy in a movie. You're fucking Ernest." Mm-hmm. Go take your rubbery face and your funny impersonations and get the fuck out of here. And that's unfortunately just Hollywood. So I don't know.
Have you ever seen a picture of Jim Varney from like the 70s?
Yes.
He was a good-looking dude, man.
Yes.
It's wild.
Which is funny when you see, because he had like the mustache and like the longish hair. It's funny when you see him, but then you watch the Ernest movies and he's got like the rubbery face and he does all these weird characters. And like, wow, like it's interesting what happens if you get typecasted into certain roles.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like, I guess you can say it's a cautionary tale, but I'm not entirely sure because like I said, he did do well for what he did at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that how do you, and this, I'm sure this happens with a lot of actors, how do you handle your career? How do you curate it? How do you plan your trajectory? Like, there's always the talk of you do a few smaller films or independent films to build up your cachet, so to speak. And then once you do like a big film, like a studio film, that whatever you make off of that, whether it's from exposure or financial, then you use that to fund your next smaller film.
Mm-hmm.
There's the term blank check that gets thrown around a lot in Hollywood, and that is once you do one or two successive films in a row that do well, then they're like, oh, you can do whatever you want. You can play with any character you want. Then you take up another film, and you're like, oh, okay, let me just do something that's a little off the beaten path, and then I'll go back to doing the action movies or whatever the case is. But you'll do it like a dramatic role because you find that character compelling, or you find the storyline interesting, or you wanted to work with that specific director. And then you go back to doing other films that are a little bit lesser known so that you can do what you want, but also, play to the masses and get all that extra exposure. So it's like maintaining your public image while at the same time doing the projects that are near and dear to you. So it's a balancing act sometimes, and some of these people can do it really well. Other people, like Jim Varney, just unfortunately fall by the wayside, and they're like, oh, now you're stuck doing this. Ryan Reynolds, being that I've already mentioned Deadpool and Wolverine, he's got a blank check at this point. He's gotten escape velocity, is what I like to refer to it as, where he has enough fame as an actor, like he's good looking, he acts well, he's made enough money at this point, he can do whatever he wants as far as projects. In fact, he practically willed Deadpool into happening. He's the one who leaked the footage of Deadpool, the test footage, when Fox initially said, no, we don't think this is going to work out. The footage got leaked, the fans saw it, the fans loved it, boom, Deadpool happened. Even Ryan Reynolds himself has fessed up and said as much, that he's the one who leaked the footage. So, but other people who don't get that chance, they go out there and they try to make a few films here and there, and then they struggle. Like, how long did it take Robert Downey Jr. before Iron Man, before he was able to get that escape velocity? Like, he was the bad boy in Hollywood for a while because of his substance abuse and the way he was, acting behind the scenes. So much so when you bring it up nowadays, and it almost seems like a distant memory, but it almost seems like you're trying to insult the man by trying to bring it up again. It's like, look, he already went through that bullshit. Let's not try to, hold him accountable now. He did his time. He did what he needed to do. He righted his ship. Now he's doing better. And hopefully continues to do so. And he gives back. So, whatever the case is, there's so many different stories in Hollywood, whether it be TV or film, that once you see certain characters in a certain light, you have a hard time not seeing them as such. And like if they try to play something different, you're like, no, that's not going to work. So I don't know. It's a tough one, and that all comes off of perceptions and studios and different people who write certain characters. It's all. I don't know. I think I've hit a dead end on this one. But you gotta wait and see. The reason I bring up Jim Varney, the one podcast you and I listen to, how did this get made? When they talk about Ernest Goes to Jail, like you could see, like they're even surprised, like, oh yeah, he was a pretty damn good actor. He did more than just children's movies, yeah, but he got stuck doing those films, so it worked for a while. I'm sure it was nice for the time being, but after that wears off, what do you do next? Can you be in a TV movie? Can you be in the next Law and Order? Can you be in the next Scorsese film? It's hard because you won't be able to break those stigmas that come with it. Leonardo DiCaprio was one, child actor who, for the longest time, people were like, oh, he's great. He's the new teen heartthrob, and he could have easily succeeded there, but failed to get past that. But because he became friends with Scorsese, he was able to have a career well beyond that. So, it all depends on, I guess, not necessarily what you know, but who you know as well. So if people are willing to take a chance on you, and then the audiences are willing to vote with their dollars to watch your projects, then you can definitely have a long career. But if not, you'll end up having a tough time breaking those glass ceilings that are in place. So let's say, I'm trying to think of somebody now. Okay, let's go Bruce Campbell. All right.
What about him?
He's known as the Evil Dead guy. Would you be able to cast him in a big action movie that's not the Evil Dead?
What do you mean? So
take Bruce Campbell and try to slot him into another big film. Would you be able to say, let's say, could you see Bruce Campbell being the Nicolas Cage role in Con Air?
Never really thought about it. I don't know.
So, all right. Another exercise is this. I was listening to a podcast recently, and they're going over the history of Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Okay.
And this is a list that came up when they were filming. So Rob Zemeckis directed Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It was the joint project between Warner Brothers and Disney at the time. Disney wasn't doing so well as far as their movies are concerned. Their animated studio was not taken as seriously then. Zemeckis had just come off of one of the Back to the Future films, and he had a quote-unquote blank check to make Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Now, the role of Eddie Valiant, there was a list of different people that they were trying to get to play. Everybody remembers Bob Hoskins as Eddie Valiant. Did a fantastic job in that role, and the movie stands out. It's iconic. Bill Murray, at one point, was considered to be Eddie Valiant, but because he was hard to reach as far as getting scripts in his hand or getting to look at projects, he didn't know about it until well after. I think there was even a story that we'd talked about here where he was reading a trade magazine in a restaurant, and then he found out that he was on the short list to play Eddie Valiant. So much so that when he read the article, he essentially yelled out in the restaurant because he would have killed to play that role. Essentially, he himself is kind of like a Bugs Bunny character in his films. So he could have probably played that off pretending to be around animated characters and probably would have loved it, but it would have been a different version of Eddie Valiant. Eddie Murphy was another actor considered for the role. I'm trying to think of who else. Harrison Ford, because Spielberg was involved, was another actor considered to play Eddie Valiant, which a lot of people said, okay, that would work, but one, he's too expensive, and two, he's more of a straight man. He's not really like zany. Like we need somebody who can pull off the fact that he's talking to cartoon characters. Another individual, Robin Williams, for Eddie Valiant. And when you go through this list, you're like, okay, this could work, that sounds a little much, but we already have the idea of Bob Hoskins in the role, so it's kind of hard to deviate. Who could have been a variant Valiant? Pardon the alliteration, but who would you have loved to have seen in that role that wasn't Bob Hoskins? It's a hard one to pin down because you don't know who's going to bring what to the role. Going a step further, since we mentioned Eddie Murphy and I was watching Beverly Hills Cop, you and I both know that the story for Beverly Hills Cop was supposed to be a vehicle for Sylvester Stallone.
Yes.
What happened? He didn't like it. He wanted to make a different type of movie. He essentially took some of the elements and just made Cobra instead.
Mm-hmm. True.
In fact, something I caught, and I never knew this. I saw it as a kid, obviously, but upon my rewatching, there is a scene in Beverly Hills Cop 2 where Axel Foley goes to Rosewood's bedroom to make a phone call, and as he's looking around the bedroom, he sees a poster of Cobra, and he looks at it for like 2 seconds. He just stares at it. And like, oh, that's a fucking reference to the fact that this was a Sylvester Stallone movie at one point. I never fucking caught that. But imagine Beverly Hills Cop as a Sylvester Stallone movie. Wildly different movie at that point. So it's like getting all the pieces together for any of these films. You know, the writers are different, so you get a different tone for the film. The director is different, so you have a different look for the film. The actor is different, so you have different takes or different interpretations of the written word. So it's like all this stuff that can change very, very easily, which is why anything that gets made in Hollywood is a triumph, because nobody sets out to make a shitty movie. Everybody thinks that they're making a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a writer, actor, director, producer, editor, hell, even the person doing makeup. So when you say, oh, who could play this role? Oh, we're looking for like a Chris Pratt type, or when they're trying to recast Indiana Jones. You know, Chris Pratt's name came up a few times, but Harrison Ford's already said, look, I'm Indiana Jones. It dies with me. And a lot of people are like, oh yeah, we really can't see another guy playing Indiana Jones because it's so hardwired in our brain so far. So when I go back to the Bruce Campbell question, like, where else could you slot him into as far as films, whether it be a dramatic role or an action role? We know he could do horror. We know he can do like some of the offbeat stuff. In fact, when he showed up in the one TV show on USA Network, Burn Notice, just seeing him there, like doing his con man talk, or his side dealing characters, like those are fun. Like those they fit him like a glove. Mm-hmm. But trying to find another thing where he could excel at, you got to take a chance on it, and then the audience has to buy into those characters as well. His character on Hercules and Xena, his character on Briscoe County. What was the name again? Briscoe County Jr.
Adventures of Briscoe County Jr. You got it.
Yeah,
yeah. And Jack of all trades.
Yeah, there you go. There's another one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's finding those characters that where they can live and breathe, and some people can pull it off. Other people get stuck in redoing the same character over and over and over again. It's the reason why, for as much as we love Bill Murray, every time he's in a movie, he's essentially selling the fact that, hey, I'm Bill Murray and I'm in this movie. You watch Ghostbusters, he's essentially breaking the fourth wall every time he's in those films. Same thing with if you watch him, even though he doesn't have a big role in it, but when you watch him in Space Jam, you're like, oh no, he's not Bill Murray playing this character. No, he's literally Bill Murray just playing himself in this movie. So how do you find a guy that's not going to be able to overshadow the material, but at the same time sell the material? So it's a weird fucking balance. And maybe I've been delving too far into some of these like old movies and script ideas, and I'm getting lost in just like filmographies and stuff like that. But it's funny like when things come up of old films that I've watched, and I'm just trying to figure out, oh, that, this would have been a cool character, that would have been a cool character. Robin Williams, another one that we mentioned earlier tonight, or at least I did, that I would have loved to have seen his version of the Joker, or hell, even the Riddler. But because he got into that pissing match with a lot of the film studios, that never came to be.
Mm-hmm.
He had some dramatic roles later in his career. What was it? 24-Hour Photo was the one where he plays like a creepy photo lab stalker.
Yes, that sounds right.
And people are like, oh, that's such a weird turn for him. Like, yeah, okay, that's a weird turn for him because you're not letting him break the chains of just being a clown or a comedian. Like, these people want to do stuff other than just make you laugh. They want to be other than just a sad clown. Jim Carrey is another one. Like, everybody loves him as the pet detective. Everybody loves him when he's, being zany and goofy. But one of my favorite movies, I say it shamelessly, is The Majestic, where maybe like a handful of scenes he gets to be silly and goofy, and he's Jim Carrey, obviously. But when he gets into the more dramatic and serious roles, or at least part of the story, like, oh shit, like he's caught in this dilemma of being this soldier who went off to war and is believed dead, but because he's the spitting image, this entire town believes he's a returned soldier from war that is not dead. And suddenly the town's revived, and he gets to meet up with his father again, and they open up a movie theater that used to be like the heart and soul of the town. Like, it's a great fucking story. But if you say, oh, Jim Carrey plays this awesome dramatic role, like, wait. Fire Marshal Bill?
Mm-hmm.
Dramatic? Fuck you. So, I don't know. And that's just finding ways to appreciate some of these actors when they do find that they have range. Man of the Moon is a good example of that. For as funny as Jim Carrey is playing the Andy Kaufman character, or, I say character, but when he, went into the method of being Andy and getting lost in those characters, like, how do you gauge them at that point? Are you just saying, oh, he's a good comedian, or no, he's an actor and he's doing really well at portraying these roles? So, I don't know. Again, I get lost in a lot of this stuff. This is like late night reading and rabbit holes that I find myself in, and I'm always like, oh, that would have been a great film with this guy, or that would have been a great film with that lady playing this character instead. But you get what you get, and then it's like set in stone. Because at that point you're like, oh, okay, that's the movie we got. That's the project that was filmed and released. But you would always be curious as to how things would have turned out a little bit differently. Another good example, I'm watching in the background, I have Logan playing on the big screen. What was his name? Dougray Scott, I think was the guy's name. Was supposed to be.
Yeah, he was going to be that, but he was too busy filming Mission Impossible 2.
Yes. So because of that, we have Hugh Jackman as our Wolverine, and it was an iconic role to the point where now, how many years later, Hugh Jackman is gearing up once again to play Wolverine in Deadpool and Wolverine.
Almost a quarter of a century.
Yeah. Imagine Dougray Scott getting that role and be like, hey, I'm old now, but I'm having fun. Mm-hmm. And if you see Dougray Scott, you can tell he's obviously aged a little bit differently because he didn't have to go through all the workout programs. He didn't have to go through the genocide of chickens for his protein plans. So things played out on a different timeline, a different variant, or different, whatever you want to refer to it as. It all plays out differently. So I love the what ifs. I love the woulda, coulda, shoulda, and I would have loved to have seen somebody else in the role, but that never comes to pass. The other funny one that we've mentioned between you and I, talking a lot of times, early in discussions, who could play Wolverine? Glenn Danzig. Because he was short and he was stocky, he looked the part. But as far as acting, probably would not have been able to pull off any of those roles or films as Wolverine. So, but okay, so I think I've bored you enough with film talk.
Hey man, I just let you roll, man, and I just follow along.
What's the problem? And this is where like I'll have a conversation with Jen, like we're watching a movie, and then by the end of it, I'm like, did you know? I'm like one of those guys. But with Jen, I can have those discussions. But even sometimes she looks at me and goes, "Uh-huh."
Well, hey, I pop in where I can pop in, and otherwise, you do what you do, man. But not every time do I have. I'm of the philosophy. Like, if I don't have something to add, I'm not going to add it. Or if I'm not going to just like throw words down just for the sake of throwing words down, you know?
No, absolutely. I understand. I appreciate it. It's just that sometimes I feel like I nerd out a little too much for my own good sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we're pretty much there as far as time, but you know what? I'll save it for another time because it's like another rabbit hole that I'm gonna just dive down, and we're not ready for it right now.
I'll save it for next week if we're going to record next week.
Exactly. We'll see what's going on because next week's 4th of July.
This is correct.
Do you have any plans for the 4th, or just gonna make it a regular day at home?
I'm just taking some downtime. I think I'm a little bit burnt these days, so I think I just need some good downtime.
Hey man, take care of yourself. Give yourself that time to recoup, relax, and do things because fuck, man, day-to-day life can get some tiring sometimes. So.
Oh yeah.
But all right, well, that's about it, I guess. Yeah, absolutely. We are there. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. My name is Eric Hernandez.
And I'm Doug.
And we are the Rabblecast.